Man, that's smart. Man, that's smart.
Well, guys, this is going to be a little bit of a different episode of this horrendous program that I do here, because we're actually going to look at a story. We're going to look at an entire story instead of me just sort of, And this is from a report that came out just a couple days ago, as of this recording, that you might have heard about by BuzzFeed. Some writers at BuzzFeed wrote about the kidnapping case, the FBI's case against a group of militia guys who last year, I don't know if you remember this, we'll get into this whole thing, but we'll just say we're planning to kidnap the governor of Michigan, whose name is Gretchen Whitmer. And I would highly recommend, it's a long article, but I would highly recommend it because it's actually very interesting. So this story kind of follows this guy Dan. He's an Iraq war veteran who, and this is a big theme in this story, he wants to make friends. This story is about militias and the FBI infiltrating a militia, but really it's about making friends. And I don't even mean that as a joke. But this guy Dan, he's an Iraq war veteran, and he's kind of a militia-y, libertarian kind of guy, it seems. And what he really wants to do is just like go shoot guns in the woods with friends. He wants to make friends with people who like shooting guns in the woods and run around doing training drills, military training drills. So he meets this group of people on the internet through the Facebook algorithm or some crap that call themselves the Watchmen. The Watchmen. Because they're really big Alan Moore fans, probably. So they screen him. This group of people screens him. I don't know, do a background check or who knows. And then they add him to this encrypted chat. And once he's on this encrypted chat, this guy Dan, who just wants to shoot cans in the woods or whatever crap he's trying to run around doing, he sees that they're a little bit more intense than he thought. And this is from the BuzzFeed article. Dan wanted to maintain his hard-earned tactical expertise, which he considered a perishable skill set, by running around this is their words again, not mine, by running around in the woods and shooting at targets. But the Watchmen seem focused on other things. In their encrypted chat, members made repeated references to something they called the Big Boog, the Big Igloo, or the Big Luau, and called themselves Mujahideen, all of which Dan would learn was shorthand for a long-awaited civil war known to adherents as the, quote, Boogaloo, unquote. I'm not going to go into, like, the definition of these Boogaloo boy guys. You can look that up on your own. There's tons of writing about it. There are, definitions out there by people who like are anthropologists and but I would say they're mostly downwardly mobile white guys who aren't very bright. Not their fault. We'll get more into this because this is probably the most interesting thing, that I haven't thought about in a while. Militia guys running around in the middle of the country with guns and stuff. Not their fault. But that's probably how I would describe them. Downwardly mobile. And there's a lot of other psychological elements to this that are interesting that we'll get into. But if we're keeping it really real, that's probably the simplest way to understand it. And that wasn't all. Buried among seemingly endless Second Amendment memes and jokes shared in the chat was a post from another member named Musico, asking the Watchmen to download a hunting app that he said they could use to track police officers' addresses and murder them in their homes, according to court testimony. So this guy Dan, the ex-military Iraq war veteran guy, who just wanted to run around with his shirt off or who knows what in the middle of the woods shooting cans and stuff. He just wanted to do that, but he's kind of freaked out by this. So he goes and he tells a cop friend of him, and the next thing he knows, the FBI is knocking on his door, and they want him to become an informant. So he becomes an informant. Informer, say daddy, me snow, me I go blame, a licky boom boom down, is a one way to describe an informer. from the great song of that goes by that name. So this guy, Dan's an FBI informant now, and this is where the problems start in the story, which we'll get to. I mean, this is a huge problemo. But the FBI provided this guy, Dan, the informant, with $55,000 in various payments. They paid his mortgage of his house. They bought him a new car. Bop. And we'll see why this is a problem in a second. But now he's working with the FBI, getting paid to infiltrate this group, the Watchmen, this quote-unquote militia group in Michigan. And the BuzzFeed article sources recordings of, actual conversations and so on with these militia guys. Because this FBI informant guy, Dan, the can man, we'll call him, because he wanted to shoot cans. He was wearing a wire a lot of the time. Okay?
Man, that's smart.
And a little bit of a divergence from the story here to inject some of my personal life into this. I actually lived years ago, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. I lived next door to a militia guy. And I found out about this because he told me about it and he tried to get me to join. He just openly, hey, join my militia, basically. And this is really like a type of guy. I had totally forgot about this incident with this militia guy where one night I pulled up to my driveway, and it's like the driveway is sort of near where his front door is, basically. And so I get out of my car. There's no way really to avoid saying hello to him. So I say hi. I made the mistake of saying, hi, how are you? And he said, lonely. I swear to God that actually happened. And that's really, I think, we're going to hear more about these militia guys. I think that's really not just being lonely, but the type of person who would tell a stranger, basically a stranger, that they're lonely, really summarizes the sort of psychology of these militia guys. But we'll get back to that because it's to me the most interesting part. So something that they gather from these FBI recordings, these wire recordings, is that these guys hate the governor, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, Gretchen. They hate her. And here's why. This is from the BuzzFeed article. On the final day of April 2020, the Watchmen went to the state capitol in Lansing to join a big protest against Whitmer's COVID-19 stay-at-home order. These guys flip their lids. These guys lose their they lose their little noodle over the stay-at-home orders, which is like, it's sort of weird because these militia guys, it seems like before the pandemic, were kind of just like anti-government. Oh, the government's trying to tell me what to do, sort of crap. Then they really focus their attention on you can't tell me to wear a mask type of stuff. But really, this is, again, the recurring theme of this is like mostly about making friends, it seems. Mostly about making friends with other people of this type. Dan wore a wire for the first time, traveling to the event. This is from BuzzFeed. For the first time, traveling to the event with Musico, Morrison, and Beller. Those are all guys who are in this Watchmen militia. The men were decked out in ballistic body armor, brandishing pistols and AR-15 rifles. They were there, Morrison and Musico said, to recruit new members. But around noon, as they milled around the crowd, Dan started hearing whispers about storming the Capitol. So of all these guys, the most sort of let's storm the Capitol kind of, the most intense one of them is this guy right here. Adam Fox is his name? Yeah, Adam Fox. And let me read you, so you can just really get a feel for who these guys are. This is from the BuzzFeed article. Fox was living with his dogs in the basement of a friend's vacuum repair shop called the Vac Shack in Grand Rapids. Lacking long-term employment, he smoked weed and spent hours on Facebook looking to make connections with other members of the Patriot community. The Patriot community is just like militia guys, basically. Community who felt angry at a government they felt had failed them, according to his fiancée at the time, Amanda Keller. So this is really the most radical guy, most intense guy of this militia group, which you'll see is important in a second. But Just one more passage here from the BuzzFeed article. Several of the this is after the FBI informant Dan starts hanging out with this guy, which there's a very important part of that story which we'll come to later. Several of the Watchmen went to meet Fox in the basement of the Vac Shack. I love that, the Vac Shack. I live under the floor of a vacuum repair shop. It was far from a proper apartment. Access was through a trapdoor hidden under a rug, and the space was crammed with old motors, belts, nozzles, and hoses. Actually, I don't know, if you're a militia guy, you like guns, that might seem like sort of a secret hideout or something. So who knows? Doesn't sound like this is optional, like he was... Doesn't seem like he was really living there by choice, though. Fox demanded they put their cell phones in a box so they couldn't be recorded, but Dan was there wearing a wire. So I don't know if you remember this. I guess it got shadowed by the Washington, D.C. Capitol thing. But in October of 2020, these guys stormed the Michigan State Capitol. I'll read you one more passage. In photos taken inside the Michigan State Capitol that day, Fox looked strong and determined as he followed the crush of bodies circulating around the building's corridors. So, I don't want to get old Jordy Peterman up in here.
Hi.
But I think there's no way to really talk about these kind of guys. There's a lot of these kind of guys out there. This is a very popular type of guy in these United States, as I call it. A lot of these kind of guys out there, and it's hard to read this stuff without trying to speculate on what the psychology is of these kind of guys. What's going on in those noodles? It's kind of hard to avoid that. And I think there's probably a bunch of things going on. You know, we could go Richard Wolff in this, where these guys are just sort of on the fringes of society. They're dealing with crisis, and they're kind of losing their minds because of the economic crisis that is going on. There's even more sort of detailed ways of looking at that, like, you know, that these guys maybe have some old view of the country when the back to the early days of the country, when there was some idea of like, I'm gonna have my land and my goats or whatever, and I'll just have my land and be left alone, which is not possible now in this kind of economic system. You got to go work at Walmart or the Amazon warehouse, and they're kind of like, they don't even realize that they're like a kind of counterculture to that. And I think it's pretty clear that there's just some straight up mental illness with these guys. Just some, which again, not their fault, and definitely, you know, it's hard also to not have empathy for these guys, because a lot of these guys just need help. I mean, especially this guy living under the floor of a vacuum place. And there's one more thing that I was thinking while reading this, which is a little bit more Jordy Peterman, which is a little bit more personal responsibility, which it kind of like, it sounds like some of these guys, maybe even this guy who was like the most intense of this group, I think for a lot of guys, there's sort of a fusion of having a purpose and war. Like war being a purpose, and a lot of these guys can't redirect that energy into like a positive, non-destructive, creative pursuit of some kind. They just don't have the resources to do that. So they'll kind of come up with a war of some kind. I mean, that's what kind of strikes me with the like, we're fighting against like they'll show up to like a park, like he is in this picture with like military gear, because they can't figure out a purpose. And so they end up at a park with military gear. So anyway, these militia guys start really losing it. They start really losing the old marbles when the lockdown happens. There's a pandemic, and, you know, local government says, hey, you know, don't go to restaurants. So, and these guys lose it. But the Watchmen's attention shifted after Whitmer shut down the state in the face of soaring COVID-19 infection rates. Within days, Pete Musico, that's like I think the leader of this Watchmen group, was allegedly calling for her arrest. You're under arrest. It's a citizen. It's a bunch of we're citizens, and we're arresting you. for the lockdown because we don't want to do it. We want to go to Chipotle. Calling her for her arrest. A few weeks later, when it became apparent that Whitmer would extend the stay-at-home order, Paul Beller, that's another one of these Watchmen militia guys, wrote in the Wire chat that she needed to be dragged in the streets and hanged. I swear to God, if this is true, I'm going to Molotov her fucking house, he wrote. I'm so effing done with this. I already said the F word, but whatever. So these guys are really foaming their military issue cargo pants about this pandemic stuff. They can't go to Wendy's. They can't go to Redbox. They can't go to the Redbox that's in the Walgreens. And this is really foaming and pissing them off. So it seems like they're talking a lot of crap on these quote-unquote encrypted chat apps. And they're talking a lot of violent stuff about the governor, Gretchen Whitmer. Not really, I mean, this is where this, and we'll get into this, where this gets into really troubling and murky territory, which is whether or not they're actually planning anything. So this is where it starts to get really complicated. And this is another quote from the BuzzFeed article. But Dan, that's the FBI informant, used his growing influence to include Fox. That's this guy, the most radical, one of the two most, I would say, radical lunatics of this thing. To include, and it's also important to know that a lot of these militia guys were basically like the Iraq War FBI informant guy, where they're just like, we would just want to run around shooting cans. But this guy's more like, let's do some kidnapping or whatever. Let's do some crazy, let's blow some things up or something. But Dan used his growing influence to include Fox in group meetings and to develop his own personal relationship with him. Fox, in turn, began referring to Dan as his, quote, brother, unquote, according to Fox's former fiancée. Again, it all comes back to making friends. Very important to make friends. It's good to have maybe something else, something positive to do with those friends, but very important to make friends. And the militia thing, making friends seems to be the driving force in all this. It was Dan, too, they said, who had brought Fox into the group, despite objections from multiple watchmen that he seemed, quote unquote, crazy. It was Dan, along with Robeson, another informant, and that guy's like a professional informant, basically. I would suggest you read the article. Robeson is actually a pretty interesting guy. He's like an ex-criminal who gets basically flipped by the FBI because you can make a lot of money being an informant, who had supported Fox's kidnapping plan, and Dan, who acted as the personal chauffeur to the Watchmen. Fox and others to ensure that they had every opportunity to conspire. He even provided snacks. This is really interesting and something I did not know before reading this article and then looking more into how being an informant works, is that when you're an informant, you're really supposed to be as passive as possible. Once you start planning things and really like making suggestions and like pushing people to do crimes or encouraging people to do crimes, now you're in, to quote Billy Madison, that's entrapment, brother. That's when we start to get into entrapment. And that's a big theme in this story, the idea that these guys, and it's really their only legal defense at this point because they've been recorded and there's been so much surveillance on these guys from the FBI. I think there were twice as many FBI agents as there were actually conspirators to kidnap the governor here. But it's really looking like there could be a case for entrapment here, and that's really also their only legal. A few weeks later, Dan the informant drove the informer. Do we have to read it again? Just so we know what an informer is, from the great rapper Snow. Informer, you know, say daddy me snow, me I go blame. A licky boom boom down. Let's never forget that song. A few weeks later, Dan the informant drove 5 watchmen and 6,000 rounds of ammunition to Cambria, Wisconsin for a national training exercise organized by Robinson, the other informant. He rented a Suburban for the weekend, paid for gas, and subsidized food and lodging for the group, all courtesy of the FBI. And this is where this gets really tricky. First of all, what we talked about is where does this mindset come from? And if I had to guess, putting it as simply as possible, it's a combination of no fault of their own idiocy. Sorry. No fault of their own of being kind of dumb. Sorry. Not their fault. And desperation and so on, etc. The other part of this is that with like FBI overstep, you can also run into some real problemos, and there's pretty much the entire history of these intelligence agencies is that. If you want to get a good, if you want to feel what I'm talking about here, watch MLK. I can't remember if it's FBI/MLK or MLK/FBI. It's a good little fun fun. It's a well-made documentary about how the FBI went to war with MLK and wanted to destroy him. So you might be thinking like these guys, look, they are dimwits, okay? And you might be thinking, well, like they deserve to be captured and thrown into prison or whatever. But really, if the FBI is allowed to overstep like this is obviously going to be and has been used in very recent history for horrible things by these intelligence agencies. So that's where we run into a little bit of those didn't really make sense, but you get what I'm saying, right?
My brain is in recovery mode.
Thank you. A good short article to read to get the problem with this is this guy, pretty good writer, Branko Article in Jacobin wrote this. With the image of an archetypal terrorist shifting under Trump's tenure as president from dark-skinned Muslim men to burly white right-wing militant militiamen and racists, the broad left is currently in danger of letting its antipathy toward this new face of terrorism put it in the position of facilitating an alarming concentration of police power and an eventual crackdown on political dissent. And part of what you see in this article and what this guy Branko Article talks about in his article about this is that this guy Fox, kind of the craziest one who was encouraged into the group by the FBI informant, the craziest one was really kind of encouraged. And the plot was kind of really, it looks like, encouraged by the FBI, which, makes the case for entrapment and so on, etc. There's even a part in this article where they talk about basically a Soprano-style scene where, like, when the FBI approached Adriana, where a female FBI agent, I don't know how they did this, probably similar to the way it happened in The Sopranos, but approaches this guy, the craziest guy, Fox's girlfriend, to kind of like, I guess, make friends with them, to introduce another FBI agent who pretends to be a bomb expert to further infiltrate the group. And while I was reading that, I was wondering, like, there's got to be a better way, because all this is to set up an arrest, which they do get arrested. They basically start planning the kidnapping, and then they're driven to a warehouse or whatever, and the FBI arrests them. But I was thinking, with all that resource, couldn't they just have gotten this guy some mental help or something? Couldn't they got him into therapy? Couldn't the FBI setup that would be like, like the girl for the FBI female, like, introduces and she's like, hey, I'm going to this thing here where we talk about if we're feeling a little kooky. That's a little bit of a joke there. But I think if you really wanted to face this issue, it wouldn't just be arresting them. It would be going to the root of, like, why are there so many people like this? Which there are a lot of people like this. Why are there so many like this? And then I think you would have to get into the area of resources. Because at least part of this has to be desperation in a system that's sort of not working for a lot of people. So now with more of this coming out about this case, we see that there's two sides to this problem of this sort of FBI police state overreach kind of thing that's been happening for a long time. I mean, just look at the Bush years is a really clear example of that, but also the Iraq War, even, the using this terrorism, terrorism, I don't know, now we got to go over there. But also, actually getting to the root of why there's so many lunatics. Why people seem to be losing their marbles so much up in this place that we live. So it's a really interesting story. I'll put a link to both of these articles below. Definitely the BuzzFeed story is well written to the point that it makes it very readable. So bye-bye, and don't forget. But before I go, I want to say one last. These are the words I want to leave you with, okay? Tective manna say daddy me snow me stab someone down the lane, a licky boom boom down. Thank you. Hey everybody, and thanks so much for watching this video. Like all the other YouTube and podcast perverts, I now have a Patreon. Every week on this Patreon, I'm uploading 2
exclusive
Patreon exclusive shows. They're like real shows, more produced, more edited.
a behind-the-scenes show where I reveal all my secrets, and a show where we go deep on an important topic that you will want to know about. Also, you get the daily and complete live show audio-only feeds. And at the top level, for only 25 bones, you can become a producer. These people that you're seeing right here make this program possible. Without them, nothing. It goes right in the toilet, right in the trash, and we set it on fire. It's these people who make it work. So please, for Christ's sake, become a patron. Bye-bye, love you.